Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityurma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. Good morning, everybody. Today's subject is, I think, the most comprehensive question than what can ask in spiritual life. The subject of knowledge and action. What I mean by this is that in spiritual life there are these two aspects. One is God realization, enlightenment, whatever you call it. That's one side of it. And the other side of it is our lives. Quite apart from our spiritual life, we seem to have another secular life, should I say. People have careers and families, personal lives, all of that. So the question is, how do I realize God? How do I become enlightened? And having become enlightened, or during the pursuit of enlightenment, how do I live my life? The so-called rest of my life. So there seems to be this division between a spiritual life and a secular life, which is what I call knowledge and action. And what is the relationship between them? Specifically, this question comes from a question that Arjuna asked Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. At the beginning of the 3rd chapter, Arjuna asks Krishna, Jayasi chet karmanaste mata buddhir janardana tat kim karmani ghore mam niyojayasi keshava. What does that mean? O Lord, O Krishna, if in your opinion, in your understanding, knowledge, that is Jnana Yoga, the knowledge of the self, is superior to action, then why are you instigating me, pushing me into this terrible action, the war? Why do you keep insisting on this? The context is, of course, the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna starts teaching Arjuna. Arjuna had asked a question about action. That should I do this or should I not do this? This, what I'm going to engage in, this terrible war. It seems horrible. Should I do it or not? And then in answer, Krishna says that you are not the body and mind, you are this infinite spiritual being. Realization that you are this infinite spiritual being will take you beyond the sufferings of mortal life. You realize you are immortal, you are not subject to the changes of the body, changes of the mind. You are ever at peace, ever perfect, and this is to be realized. So obviously Arjuna would say, well, that's great. I'd love to do that. But what about this thing? Krishna's response is, you have to fight this war. Why? It seems to me that what you have said, that's really worthwhile. If that's true, then what else is equal to it? Enlightenment is one thing that we should all try to do. So that seems that I should withdraw from all these worldly activities and maybe become a monk and go to the Himalayas and meditate and study and become enlightened. That seems to be what your teaching implies, that self-knowledge is supreme. But then you are saying you have to fight this war. Why? If knowledge, enlightenment is superior to action, why are you forcing me? Why are you insisting on this action and the most terrible of actions? This horrible engagement in war and destruction. So there is Krishna's answer. So this is analogous to, maybe not as dramatic in our lives. We don't have to fight wars and do all that, but we do have our little battlefields. Everybody, whether it's in our professional lives, in our relationships, or at office or at home, or even in our personal lives. It could be a battle of health, physical, mental issues, and all of these things. So these are all our little battlefields which we all have. How much should we engage in these things? To what end? To what purpose? If the message of religion or spirituality is true, if God exists, if I am an immortal soul, then what is the importance of this little life? So that is the big question. And Krishna's answer is of vital importance to us for practical religion. I mean, quite apart from metaphysics, quite apart from Vedanta and the infinite being and Brahman and Atman, what is the importance for our personal lives, so for the way we put spirituality into practice in our lives? So Krishna's answer to that question is, he says to Arjuna, Loke asmin dvividha nishtha pura prokta maya nagha jnana yogena sankhyanam karma yogena yoginam. Says, O Arjuna, there is this twofold path which I have taught from ancient times. Spirituality from its very beginning has these two aspects. What are these two aspects? Sort of cryptically he says, for the Sankhyas, it is the path of jnana, knowledge. And for the yogis, it is the path of action. Jnana yoga for Sankhyas and karma yoga for the yogis. Now what does that mean? What does that mean? We'll deliberate upon that for some time. And this interpretation, remember, is according to classical Advaita Vedanta, based on the commentaries of Shankaracharya on these verses. So what is this karma yoga? What is this jnana yoga? What is the path of knowledge? What is the path of action? In a sense, jnana yoga tells us that we are already that perfect spiritual being, that existence, awareness, bliss, infinite isness awareness, I would like to put it that way. This infinite isness awareness, this term I use sometimes, is actually a direct translation of the Upanishadic definition of Brahman. Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. Satyam means isness. Jnanam means awareness. Anantam means infinite. So Brahman, the ultimate reality, is infinite isness awareness. One might say, well, good for the ultimate reality. What about me? You are that. That is the essence of the Upanishadic teaching, that you are actually not what you think you are. You are this infinite isness awareness. Well, good, but our first reaction is, I do not know this. I hear this. I read about it. But it's not evident to me. Even after I listen to it, and then, Swami, you provide me with many arguments in its favor. Well, it sounds interesting, but it seems so far from my lived experience, this life. So my reply to this, come back to this claim that you are infinite being awareness, is that it sounds cool, but it's not me. I don't get it. So the problem is ignorance, and ignorance of a particular kind, ignorance of our real nature, as far as Vedanta has claimed it. If ignorance is the problem, then always the solution is knowledge. What kind of knowledge? What we are ignorant of, there must be knowledge of that. So we are ignorant of the true nature of the self, at least according to Advaita Vedanta. Then the knowledge must be of the true nature of ourselves. And what is the method for this? The method suggested by Krishna is Jnana Yoga. Jnana Yoga literally comprises of Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. So this Vedanta, this body of knowledge is there. One must systematically, Shravana means literally hearing, but one must systematically study this, preferably under a competent teacher. One must systematically study this, and when you study it, you have doubts, you have questions. I hear what you are saying, but here are my questions, my doubts, and those things have to be clarified. So there's a process of reasoning. Often it is question answer between teacher and student, or between the text and the reader, or between different students, people who are studying it together. So this process of inquiry at this level, it goes on until we have clarity, until we can confidently claim that, yes, I understand. I know the teaching and I understand it now. But even after that, there remains a feeling, I understand it, but it's not a living reality for me now. My life is still going on the way it was. I don't feel significantly different. So, to make it a living reality, this understanding has to be deepened. And I'm choosing my words carefully. Here you are not looking for another new mystical experience. The problem with mystical experiences is that, I was just listening to this talk by Christoph Koch, who is the chief scientist of the Paul Allen Brain Institute. He's written a new book, The Feeling of Life Itself. And he was giving a talk at the Harvard bookstore just earlier this week, so an online webinar nowadays. By the way, it's not just us who have internet difficulties. It's not just who have internet difficulties. It's the Harvard bookstore. When they started the webinar, the speaker had disappeared. They couldn't find the speaker. He was offline. So they had to call the speaker, get hold of him. He was having internet difficulties of his own. So this went on for quite some time. So he was saying in that talk, he was quite open about having mystical experiences. He had this experience where he was aware, but there was no sense of self, that he felt he had transcended time and space. All those experiences. You might say, that's wonderful. Here's a scientist saying that, but there's a catch. He's saying, all that I experienced, but that does not mean that I actually transcended time and space. It's possible for the brain to generate such experiences. You feel that way. And a mystic experience provides you with that. So he's taking a mystic experience seriously, but within the confines of physical science, that the brain by itself can produce such experiences. But that's not the understanding that, say, spirituality wants to take from it. When spirituality says that you are this, that unlimited awareness, pervading and transcending time and space, they literally mean it. They're not saying that you feel like that. What's the good of feeling like that if you're ultimately just a mass of flesh and blood? After some time, you're going to die. And that's the end of it, no matter what your mystical experience is. And if that's all that there is to it, then there's not much point to all these discussions. So the problem with mystical experiences is it could be treated as something being produced by your brain, and you don't have to go to the latest consciousness studies for that. All throughout history, mystics have been criticized and dismissed as being mad or subject to hallucinations. So that is the problem with mystic experiences. It might be wonderful for the person who's having it, but not necessarily convincing, either for the person and certainly not for others also. Vedanta is not even asking you to believe in it. Rather, the understanding which you have got through Shravana and Manana, that is deepened, and a clarity dawns on you through that Nididhyasana Vedantic meditation, that I am Brahman, just as we feel, or even more so, than we feel that I am this body and mind, much more so that I am this infinite being, it becomes clear to you. I am beyond death, beyond disease, and so on. Now, this sounds wonderful, so we have a method now for realizing it. But the problem here is that we may be trying it, we may claim that we have attended many, many talks, and we have many, many notebooks full of notes taken during Vedanta talks sincerely. I remember when I was a novice, we used to sit with this wonderful teacher, this Swami, on the roof of the monastery in Doer after breakfast and study the Vedantic texts for an hour every day. And there was this other novice who was senior to me, who was leaving for the Belur monastery for his training center. And he had a pile of notebooks, which he had taken notes assiduously. They're not only notes, they're also doodles and cartoons and stuff like that when he got bored. And this treasure house, he said, I want to give you this gift. And I knew what was coming. I said, no, I don't have any space for that. All of that we may have, and we feel that we have not really become enlightened. It is not working. This whole Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, this inquiry, Vedanta, it's just adding to my storehouse of knowledge, but not really very enlightening for me, not life transformative. So what is the problem? So there is the first level of problem, ignorance, but there's a more basic level of problem called scattered mind, not just ignorant mind, but scattered mind. In Sanskrit, vikshepa. And for vikshepa, for scattered mind, as we know today, it's a huge problem in this world today, especially due to social media, which Shankaracharya or the Upanishad rishis did not have to face. So the remedy for that, of course, is focus. The remedy for distraction is focus. And Daniel Goleman, who wrote this book called Focus, he says, I wrote this book because I kept hearing of this serious new problem. Distraction has always been a problem. The Vedantins of Upanishads 5,000 years ago recorded as a big obstacle, distraction. But today, in the 21st century, Daniel Goleman writes that parents and teachers, even in corporations, people are talking about this new generation of youngsters brought up from babyhood with these devices. And they're very intelligent, but tremendously distracted minds. They can't focus or hold on to the focus for more than a few minutes. We have all had that problem, but this has just exacerbated. The modern technology seems to have exacerbated the lifestyle we have. So distraction, he wrote this book called Focus. And thousands of years before Daniel Goleman, in Vedanta, in Buddhism, in yoga, they said focus is essential for spiritual life. I was reading one of the texts that we had for Christian contemplative studies at the Divinity School was Simone Weil's book, I think, Waiting for God. So there's a chapter on concentration, on the utility of school studies for spiritual life. Very interesting. I think it's something that every student should read, especially spiritual seekers, students who are spiritual seekers, who are interested in spirituality. There she writes that seriously studying in school, by school she means, of course, school and college and university, seriously studying at school develops the faculty of concentration, which is vital for spiritual life. So she says, every subject, even the subjects you don't like, and feel bored by, especially those ones, if you can develop the ability to focus on that, that is of inestimable value in your spiritual life. She goes on to say that she equates distraction, lack of concentration, lack of focus with sin, with being unspiritual, and concentration and focus with being spiritual. How do you do that? In the Upanishadic or Vedantic scheme of things, the method for focus is called upasana. Upasana literally means worship. Now it has two components. Worship has two components. One is, of course, devotion, when you are worshipping something. And there is also the component of meditation. So focus, devotion and meditation. Bhakti yoga and Raja Yoga. Both are implied in the Vedic term upasana. In fact, the term upasana is a common Indian word in just about every Indian language. It means worship. Now, there's no time to dilate on this subject, but note two interesting things. These two components, the devotion part of it, the bhakti part of it, deals primarily with emotions. The major source of distraction for us in this world is desire, this outward movement of the psychic being towards things in the world. In fact, Freud defines libido as the movement of the subject towards the object. Anything in the world outside towards which we flow internally, from within to outward. So that is caused by desire. It's of the nature, I want. I want the world. What bhakti does, what devotion to God does is, it replaces the world with God. The same I want, the world, that's replaced God. Same I want now flows towards God. That I want XYZ, which was scattered in the world in 100 different desires. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, for worldly persons, they are scattered in 100 different ways. So in 100 different ways, that I want was broken up and was flowing towards the world. Now the whole thing is pulled back and it's directed towards God. It's concentrated and directed towards God. That itself solves, I would say, 80% of the problem of distraction. But 20% more, you need actually a practice of meditation. So to actually consciously, deliberately collect the powers of the mind and direct attention towards an object of meditation, that is necessary. So this upasana has two aspects. There's an emotional aspect dealt with by bhakti, and there is a psychic control aspect, mental control aspect dealt with by Raja Yoga or Patanjali Yoga. Both are necessary. At this point, a skeptic would say, yeah, that's true, but I have been trying to meditate for most of my life and it is not working, let me tell you. I either feel sleepy or I feel restless and distracted. So it's not working. Why is meditation not working? Why is upasana not working? There is an even more basic level of problems and obstacles. And I assure you this is the last one. We are not going to go on and on. I'm reminded of this funny anecdote. I'm sure it didn't happen, but somebody, it's in England that when I think Bertrand Russell was talking about science and philosophy, about the nature of the world and the planet Earth, hanging in empty space. One little old lady comes up to him and says, "Young man, you are very clever, but everybody knows that the earth rests on a tortoise, on a giant tortoise." And so either it was Russell or some scientist. He said, "Yes, ma'am, but what does the tortoise rest on?" And she smiled. "Oh, don't try to be so clever. Everybody knows its tortoise is all the way down." So I'm not going to say there are going to be problems all the way down. This is the rock bottom. The ground level problem is impurity of mind. In Sanskrit, chitta mala, impurity of mind. So see, 3 levels of problems: impure mind, scattered mind, ignorant mind. So impure mind, the obvious remedy for this is pure mind. So that's a no-brainer. How do you achieve that? So this is where karma yoga is very useful, where the actions of our life are spiritualized. Instead of being self-directed, doing things for oneself, one does it either as welfare of everybody else, I'm doing it as service to humanity, or as service to God. That could be easier for many people. I'm doing all the actions of my life as a worship of the Lord. Here's something has to be noted. Last night I was asked to give a talk to one of our ashrams in India, and that was in Hindi. I haven't spoken in Hindi for I think 5 or 6 years, but it went well. In the Q&A, a young man asked, so the discussion was on karma yoga. So these are all close devotees of the ashram who are engaged in a lot of activity, work. So he says, well, Swami, when I work for others, I do service for others. That I understand is karma yoga. But then there are so many things that I do for myself. So there are, for example, so I'm eating, that's obviously for myself. There is no element of karma yoga there. There is something in between, like when I'm doing things for my family, for my parents or family, when I'm doing a job and getting a salary, that's in between. That's not quite just myself, but not quite very openly for welfare of this. There's still a me and mine involved there. How do I make everything into karma yoga? And the answer was, don't have separate philosophies. Don't have a philosophy for social work, and a philosophy for office work, and a philosophy for dealing with your, interacting with your family, and a philosophy for yourself. No. Have one philosophy that covers everything, and that's the philosophy of karma yoga. All of it is karma yoga. Whether you are feeding the poor in the Vedanta society, or in the ashram there, or you're teaching children for free as a service, or you're working in the office and getting a salary, or you're taking care of your parents and your family, or you're feeding this body. All of it belongs to the Lord. The mistake is to think that, so when I'm doing something for this body, I'm doing it for myself. Look at the insidious thought in that I am the body. I am this thing. And the ones connected to this body, father, mother, husband, wife, children, they are mine. That all comes from the body idea. Whereas Karma Yoga says the entire thing belongs to the Lord. And truly, does it not? I said to him that even take the thing which you identify with the most, the body. And when I do something for the body, I feel I am doing it for myself. It seems obvious to me. But really, how much of the body do you have control over, possession over? One sadhu in Uttarakhand, he said, is this body yours? You show me the papers for the body. If the cop pulls you over here and says, show the paper, not for the car, license and registration for the body. How do I know this is your body? How do I know you have not stolen this body? Who gave you this body? A gift? Did somebody give it to you as a gift? Do you remember being given this body? From now on it's yours? No. Did anybody tell you it's your body? No. You just assumed. That's not something that will fly in the local precinct. That I just assumed it's my car. No. Do you own the materials out of which this body is made? The earth and the fire and the water and the so many elements. No, they are made by God. You don't own them. They're God's elements. Did you make this body? Even your parents did not make this body. Nature makes this body. Nature is the power of God. Does this body, do you have control over this body? No, and thank God that we do not have control over the body. Within a minute we would be in the ICU. Under Rama's care. That we do not, almost all the processes, and especially the vital processes, are run automatically by nature. They are on autopilot. If we try to run it, we would make a mess of it within seconds. So, even this body, as a matter of fact, not as a matter of belief. As a matter of belief, in fact, you think it's yours. As a matter of fact, it's not yours. If somebody protests, so that's a very religious way of thinking. All right, Bhagavad Gita, see how impersonal it can be. It says, Prakrityeva karmani kriyamanani sarvasha yapashyati tathatmanam akartaram sapashyati. In the 13th chapter, I think, in the Bhagavad Gita, it says, everything here, body and mind also, everything is being done by nature. No, God is not introduced here at all. Everything is being done by nature. This much is true. Whether it's nature or God, it's not you. The one who understands this, understands that the self is not a doer, not an agent of action. It's not doing anything here at all. It's just illumining it. It's a very Sankhyan concept. So, even for the body, I told that young man that you must have the same philosophy. It all belongs to the Lord. Even when I'm taking care of the body, I am serving the Lord. So one philosophy, whether you're eating food or you're putting food into the mouths of hungry orphans at the ashram, it's all service of the Lord. So, Karma Yoga produces purity of mind. Chitta Shuddhi, purity of mind. This cleansing of the heart, cleansing of the mind. In the Beatitudes when Jesus Christ says, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. This is the precondition of illumination, of God realization. Blessed are the pure in heart. This is the groundwork, the unglamorous, hard, what do you call in America, the grunt work of spiritual life. What Swami Vivekananda insisted on again and again, that a moral, ethical life, character building first of all, before ecstasies and high philosophy. So this character building, the basis of spiritual life. Impure mind overcome by pure mind. Pure mind generated by Karma Yoga. Then you go to the next level. Distracted mind overcome by focused mind. Focused mind generated by Upasana with two aspects. Bhakti and Dhyana, meditation. Then with this purified and concentrated mind, you go to the third level where the problem is ignorant mind. Ignorant mind overcome by knowledge. Knowledge generated by Jnana Yoga. This is the structure of spiritual practice. Again, of course, this is a classical Advaita interpretation. The three kinds of obstructions. What I said all this time, in the Himalayas, if you ask a monk, He will just use half a sentence. He'd say, Malavikshepa avarana nivritti. That's it. Mala means impurity of mind, vikshepa means scattered mind, avarana means veiled mind. Veiled mind. These three things have to be tackled. All of spiritual practice is a kind of negative practice. It removes obstacles. You cannot catch hold of God by spiritual practice. You cannot realize who you are, and enlightenment. It cannot be done by spiritual practice. That is the great conclusion of Shankaracharya. What does spiritual practice do? It has a negative impact. That means it removes the obstacles. It doesn't catch hold of God. It doesn't make you into Brahman. God is. You are already Brahman, whether self-knowledge or God realization, whichever way you put it. Neither are amenable to our efforts. It's an established fact. In self-knowledge, you will say it shines forth by itself, not because we did something. In God realization, you will say, by the grace of the Lord, I realize the Lord. Not because of the effort that we put in. Is the effort that we put in action? Is it useless? I'm tying it back to Arjuna's question. Is it useless? Not at all. It is most useful. But it is useful in removing the dirt, the complications that we have set up over lifetimes. It's the mess that we have made that we have to clean up. Otherwise, it's all right. So, the removal of impurity, the focusing of removal of impurity, removal of distraction, removal of ignorance, that we can do. So that is within the range of our effort. And at each level, the method changes. So karma yoga, then upasana, and then jnana yoga. First, unselfish action, moral and ethical action, unselfish action, leading to devotion to God, and focused mind, leading to inquiry, philosophical inquiry into the self. So this is the structure of spiritual practice. This is what Krishna meant when he said to Arjuna about the question of action and knowledge. If knowledge is superior, spiritual enlightenment is superior, why are you asking me to do things in this world, especially terrible things? Krishna's answer was, it will not work. Spiritual knowledge will arise through, see, when I tell you that you are the Atman, you will immediately give the first of the objections, that I don't know, veiled mind. And if you try to tackle it, you will give the second objection, you'll bring forth, you will yourself realize, we'll ourselves realize that we have that other level of problems, distracted mind. And when we try to meditate and overcome that, we will ourselves realize we have that ground level of problems, impure mind. So these three have to be tackled by us, and therefore Krishna says, I am teaching you action also. What kind of action? That unselfish action, which clears up the ground level of problems. That is the impure mind. Impure mind must be purified. Then the purified mind must be concentrated. Later on, 6th chapter, Krishna will teach meditation. And then comes the cultivation, the inquiry into the self, the jnana yoga, which is the level of knowledge or enlightenment, which will lead directly to enlightenment. So this is the structure. So action is prescribed because it will generate fitness for enlightenment. And this is what Advaita says again and again. Advaita does not discard action. In fact, from Advaitic perspective, action is most important in spiritual life. Without that, the fitness for enlightenment will not be generated. The fitness for jnana yoga, it depends on doing karma yoga. This is Shankaracharya's own words. This may sound contradictory because Shankara keeps on saying action and knowledge are contradictory. We'll see why so. But this is from Shankaracharya's own commentary, that the fitness for jnana yoga is generated by karma yoga and upasana. Fitness for enlightenment is generated by unselfish action and devotion. So once you are fit for enlightenment, so do you give up action? Not there too. Sri Krishna says that every moment the body is acting. Either you do so through ignorance when you are identified with body and mind, or you do so through enlightenment. After being enlightened, even then action continues. Aurobindo, the great modern Indian philosopher, has severely criticized Shankara because he says Shankara put forth an ideal of the inactive monk. That is the highest ideal, and that is not what the Gita or the Upanishads teach. So Shankara taught renunciation of action. But I think that is not a good reading of Shankara. It's very telling that Aurobindo, in his long life, after an initial period of political activism, actually gave up all action himself, and the rest of his life he was completely withdrawn and inactive more than any other monk, as far as external world was concerned. Of course, he was very active in an internal, like on an intellectual and spiritual plane. But practically speaking, he was directly almost inaccessible to people for most of his later life. In contrast, it's ironic. In contrast, Shankaracharya, whom he accuses of praising inaction, Shankaracharya was active throughout his short life of 32 years. Intense activity. Whether it's composing the bhashyas, whether it is spreading the word of Vedanta, establishing the monastic orders, reorganizing Hinduism, the effects of his actions can be felt down centuries till today, 1400 years. I am a monk of an order started by Shankaracharya. So, here is this person. You're accusing him of abandoning action and praising inaction. Most active person, intensely active person. And the person who accuses him is the most inactive person in a gross sense, that in the sense external sense. Of course, internally he was a great yogi. Anyway, polemics apart. We'll dive a little deeper into this question of action and knowledge before we resurface again. Hopefully they say that there are gems in the depth of the ocean. So we'll have to hold our breath and dive deep into the ocean of a very subtle way of thinking. So, what is the enlightened person's perspective on action? Krishna says even an enlightened person does action for the welfare of the world. But what is the enlightened person's perspective on action? How is it different from ours? In the 4th chapter, Krishna says to Arjuna that there is a mystery about action. What is that mystery? He says the mystery is something like this. Karmanya karmaya pashyet akarmani cha karmaya sabuddhiman manushyeshu sayukta kritsna karma krit. The one who sees no work, who sees work in no work. And the first one is akarmani cha karmaya pashyet. So so when there is work, he sees no work, and when there is no work, he sees work there. Such a person is wise, and such a person is truly established in yoga, and such a person is the doer of all works. Now, what a strange statement. You see that when there is work, you are seeing it as no work. And when there is no work, you say that it is work. And such a person is supposed to be intelligent. Who is intelligent? The one who sees things as they are. If there is work, by work and no work means the way we normally would understand it. Person sitting quietly, no work. Person running around doing all sorts of things, busy. A city that never sleeps. Yeah. So that is work. In Manhattan, people are always working. So when you're active physically, mentally, that is work. And when you're physically, you see that you're sitting quietly, maybe a yogi in the Himalayas, that is no work. And according to Krishna, the one who sees when a person is running around and doing all sorts of activities, who sees truly that it's not work. And when a person is sitting quietly, apparently not doing anything, the person will say, no, that's work. And that's supposed to be intelligent. Buddhiman, that is an intelligent person, the knower among all people. So that is supposed to be a person who is a true yogi, yukta, established in yoga. And there is a person, mysterious term, the doer of all works. What does this mean? The enlightened person sees that apparently for the enlightened person, when the enlightened person is doing a lot of work, like Krishna, or like Shankaracharya or Vivekananda, if you ask that person, he will say, truly speaking, I'm not doing anything. How is that possible? What is the nature of enlightenment? That's what is being shown here. The relation of knowledge and action at a deep level is being shown here. To illustrate this, Shankaracharya in his commentary on this verse, he says that imagine a boat. You're in a river in a boat, and suddenly you get this shock. You see that you feel you are stationary and the bank is moving, the trees on the bank are moving, the buildings on the bank are moving. I had this experience. I was so thrilled to see this commentary because in Belur Mutt, in our monastery there, which is on the Ganga, when you cross the Ganga and you go to the other side, where is Calcutta. So you come from Calcutta to Belur Mutt, or you're going from Belur Mutt to Calcutta. In the middle of the river, as the little boats are there. So as you go on those little boats, suddenly you feel that you are stationary in the river, but the trees and the temples and all on the bank, they are moving. Obviously, it's just an illusion. You get this feeling sometimes you're sitting on a train, and so you suddenly feel the platform is moving, and it's actually you are moving, but the nature of the movement of the boat is actually superimposed on the bank. The unmoving bank seems to be moving, and the moving boat does not seem to be moving. So, exactly like that, Shankaracharya says, in our case, you, the witness consciousness, you are never changing. You are always the illuminer of all action. But the action of the body and mind, the movement of the body, speech, thinking of the mind, all that is imposed upon you, and you get the feeling, I walk, I talk, I think, I am happy, I am unhappy. These are all movements of the mind. These are all movements of the body. These are all changes taking place in the world, in the body, in the mind. Not in you. You are like the bank of the river. You are like the temple on the bank, which is not moving. Not like the boat. It's the movement of the boat which is suddenly put illusorily. It appears on the bank. The movement of the body and mind, the activities of the organs, it appears imposed upon you, the witness consciousness. And you feel you are in action. The enlightened person knows, though it looks like that, actually I, the witness consciousness, I, the Atman, that infinite isness awareness, I do not do anything. This all the doing is happening in the body mind at the level of appearance. The screen in the movie. And suppose there is a car chase going on in the movie and the cops are chasing the robbers. The screen is neither driving a car nor chasing robbers. The screen is not a cop nor a robber. Nothing. But it enables the entire movie to happen. Without the screen, nothing would happen. You, the infinite isness awareness, in you the movie of life is playing. And because you cover yourself up, you're veiled, veiled mind. And then the game begins. We have become totally identified. We think we are this body and mind. And then whatever is happening in the movie, we think this is real and this is what I am. The enlightened person sees the movie and also knows nothing is actually happening. So the enlightened person would say, in the midst of all actions, karmani cha akarmaya pashyet, in the midst of all activities, who sees, there is no activity going on at the level of the self. I am the witness consciousness, ever free of karma. And in the case of the unenlightened person, who says, I will not engage in any kind of karma, and I sit quietly and meditate on God, the enlightened person will say, that's also karma. That's also a kind of karma. Not doing anything, whether for an unenlightened person, whether that person does something or does not do anything, both are karma. For an enlightened person, whether that person does something through the body and mind or does not do something through the body and mind, none of it is karma. So, when the unenlightened person runs away from society, I will not be part of this world, I will withdraw from all worldly activities, still it's an activity. It's still karma. It's like when we say that, I will fast. Now, fasting is not a positive action. You're just stopping yourself from eating. But isn't it a kind of action? Because you are doing something. It takes quite a bit of effort. Probably more effort than eating. So, I will fast. That's a kind of action. So, the enlightened person sees, even when apparently there is no action, there is action going on. for the unenlightened person. So such a person is intelligent, buddhiman manushya. This person truly sees, the enlightened person. Sayukta, now we understand, this person is a true yogi. And the doer of all actions, Kritsna Karma Krit means the doer of all actions. What does it mean? Ultimately, the purpose of all action is to lead you to enlightenment. So this person has attained the purpose of all action. We normally think, what is the purpose of action? It is to earn money, it is to maintain my body, it is to get me a nice apartment to live in, it is to help people in the world. That's all at the level of identification with body and mind. All of this action will ultimately lead to enlightenment when you realize you are this unchanging isness awareness, unlimited, unchanging isness awareness. So this is the secret of action from the enlightened person's perspective. The enlightened person can engage in dynamic action for the welfare of others. Why welfare of others? Why not his own welfare? Because he does not need any welfare from the world. You're an immortal spirit, isness, awareness. What do you need? From whom do you need anything? What can add to you? What can take away from you? Nothing can affect you. All your needs are permanently satisfied. So, with the body and mind still appearing to the enlightened being, that body and mind, the natural reaction will be to sacrifice it, to let it go in the welfare of the world. In the Song of the Sannyasin, when he talks about enlightenment, that let the body go, he says. Let karma float it down. Its task is done. Go thou from place to place and enlighten people. Bring them out from Maya's veil, Swami Vivekananda says. So their actions will be now for the welfare of the world. Not just spiritual welfare. Swami Vivekananda said, it is an insult to a starving man to teach him metaphysics. So it will be like all-round welfare, spiritual welfare, educational, physical. In all ways, the enlightened person will try to bring about the welfare of others. That's one kind of enlightened person. There may be other kinds. See, for an enlightened person, there is no prescription that they have to be like this. That's where I think Aurobindo is mistaken again, that they have to be like this, they have to engage in action. No, not necessarily. Swami Gambhiranji speaks of three kinds of Jivan Muktas, three kinds of enlightened persons. One might be completely absorbed in Brahman, in Samadhi, barely aware of the external world, or not at all aware. And such persons have attained to the peak of spiritual attainment. They have realized what the truth is and they are absorbed in it. That's what Vivekananda wanted from Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna scolded him, thank God, but then that's why we are sitting here today. But what he wanted was not a mean thing. That is, in traditional spiritual path, that is regarded as the final, the highest. So, that's one kind of enlightened person. Are they enlightened? Yes. Like Totapuri, for example. Enlightened, of course. Someone like Ramana Maharshi, for example. Perfectly enlightened. Note, he was always absorbed. But a great amount of good was done through him and is still being done. Just because he was absorbed in God. Swami Vivekananda says, these rare souls who may sit in a mountain cave and be absorbed in God and pass away there, they will think a few thoughts for the welfare of the world. And those thoughts will live on. They will penetrate through the stone walls of the caves and permeate the thought universe of the world and will work out their effect. So, one kind of enlightened person remains absorbed in Brahman and not at all active, at least from our perspective. The second kind of enlightened person is aware of this world, enlightened, but aware of the appearance of the world appearance, and considers it as fun, as magic, as something crazy. I am reminded of that sadhu in Dakshineshwar who would come out, who would meditate all day long in the cave and come out once in a while, look at the temple and the river and the sky and say, wow, how wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Now, what is the play of Maya? And go back into the hut and meditate again. They look upon it as play. They are often the crazy people of God. Sri Ramakrishna says enlightened persons may sometimes live like little children or like mad people. That man who came just like a what you might call a hobo into the Dakshineshwar temple, dirty, matted hair, People thought he was crazy. And Sri Ramakrishna pointed him out to Hriday. Look, that's an enlightened person. He is a Jivan Mukta, liberated while living. People thought he was mad. I think children laughed at him and chased him or something like that. But when he came into the temple of Kali and recited a hymn. They said that veritably it's as if the entire temple was shaking. And when he walked away, so Hridayaram thought, maybe I can catch hold of him and get enlightenment or at least some spiritual advice. He started chasing him. And this crazy man threw stones at him to dissuade him. Finally, he would not listen and came close and asked him, give me some spiritual advice. And the man just said, look at this ditch water, dirty water of the drain, and the water of the Ganga. When the two you see them, they are the same, then you have attained enlightenment. And then he walked on. So such people are there. They are also enlightened, but they are not engaged in action, like deliberate action for the welfare of the world as we might think it. The third category is those who feel for the sufferings of everybody else and they want to help everybody. Their hearts melt with compassion. So those are the enlightened ones who are the great teachers of the world. They spend the rest of their lives, like the Buddha, like Vivekananda, like Shankara, in uplifting humanity for the welfare of the world. That third kind of action is what Sri Ramakrishna, what Swami Vivekananda, that is what they stressed as karma yoga, from the action performed by an enlightened being for the welfare of the world. One might ask, well, what good is that? Let me first attain enlightenment and then I will do that kind of action for the welfare of the world. No, Shankaracharya himself says in the Bhagavad Gita in the 2nd chapter, when Arjuna asks Krishna, what are the characteristics of an enlightened person? Sthita pragyasya ka bhasha. What are the characteristics of an enlightened person? Very beautiful sequence of verses at the end of the 2nd chapter. There, Shankaracharya comments, what's the point of knowing the characteristics of an enlightened person? That might be nice to know, but what relevance does it have for us now? He says, no, it has great relevance. Yani eva kritarthasya lakshanani tani eva sadhakasya sadhanani yatna sadhyatvat, he says. That's a line from his commentary. Whatever are the characteristics of enlightened persons, the characteristics of saints, those are practices for the rest of us. That's natural for them. The unselfishness, the fearlessness, the complete serenity, the ability to withstand suffering and not be moved, all of that, those are practices for the rest of us. It comes naturally to them, we must consciously practice them. So that's the thing that we have to live. We have to try to live like that. Why? Because he says by practicing that, we will become enlightened. That's where the virtues which are taught on the path of spirituality, they come from the lives of the enlightened beings. We see how they are and then we try to inculcate them. There's an element of artificiality involved there because we are not yet there. But there's no other way of progressing. We have to do that. So all the great spiritual traditions of the world, from the beginning, they have taught both knowledge and action. And we now realize these are not two separate things. They are essential. Action is essential for enlightenment. On a deeper level, the two are the same. And the action is an expression of enlightenment. The third kind of enlightened being, the action is an expression of enlightenment. So in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, look at how there is a continuity of thought. Gita, Krishna says to Arjuna, the sum and substance of my teaching is ma manusmara yuddhyacha. Keep your mind on me and fight the battle of life. Look, knowledge and action. You might say devotion and action, fine. But it's a connection with God, spirituality, and a connection with the world. Fight your battle of life wherever you are. You have to do this. And keep your mind on God. Not one of the two. Often monks, we have a debate on this. Why not just keep your mind on God? And the other monks who would say, why not just do good to humanity? Why bring in all that metaphysics? But both are necessary. And both are necessary because the deeper understanding is it's not both. It's the same thing. If we try to say one and not the other, there is some lack of understanding there. Only the world, not God. There's a lack of understanding there. What is this world you're trying to serve? Only God, not the world. What is this world you're trying to avoid? It's God. With eyes closed and eyes open, as Sri Ramakrishna would say. Jesus Christ, when he was asked, what should we do? Of all the commandments in the Judaic religion, what is the important one? And Jesus says, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy might. What a beautiful statement. And, one more, love thy neighbor. They are not two things. It's the same thing. Action and knowledge. And then Vivekananda, when he gave a motto for us, Atmano mokshartham jagat hitaya cha, for the liberation of the self. Here the self means the individual self, the one identified with body and mind, not the ultimate self of isness, awareness, because that's already liberated, always. So the one where we find ourselves right now, for our liberation, Atmano mokshartham jagat hitaya cha, for the welfare of the world. Cha means and. So knowledge and action. Why both? Because the deeper understanding is, the preliminary understanding, as Shankaracharya says, without that action you will not attain to that knowledge. That action makes us ready for that knowledge. You remember, impure mind, distracted mind, ignorant or veiled mind, and for that you need karma yoga, upasana and jnana yoga. So all of that is necessary for enlightenment. But the deeper understanding is this: one's own enlightenment and the welfare of the world are part of the same spiritual philosophy. They are not two different things. Yeah. So whether it is Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, or Jesus Christ, or today Swami Vivekananda, this synthesis of knowledge and action, it is a more holistic spiritual philosophy, a more comprehensive spiritual philosophy, which covers the entirety of our life. Like Sister Nivedita said, henceforth no division between the secular and the spiritual, secular and the sacred. No division between secular and sacred, not in the sense of our secular world, where even the sacred is secularized. So sacred is secularized means yoga, which is a spiritual path. What is it for? Well, it prevents wrinkles and it keeps you limber and it boosts your immune system. All of that is true. But those are the secular benefits. You have made it into a secular practice. A little bit of calisthenics, this, physical exercise. No. Even the secular world is spiritualized. All of it is for enlightenment. All of it is for God realization. Whether you are on the path of bhakti, devotion, all of it is for as a worship of my beloved Lord. What I do in my heart and what I do in the world outside. Or in the path of self-realization, all of it is an expression that I am Brahman. The Gita verse where Sri Krishna integrates both. Brahmarpanam Brahmahavi, Brahmarpanam Brahmahavi, Brahmagno Brahmana Hutam, Brahmevate Nagantavyam, Brahma Karma Samadhina. Favorite verse, because it is followed immediately by delicious food. But it is not a verse for eating. It means, imagine the ancient Vedic worship, the fire sacrifice. There is a ladle, the arpan, by which the havi, the sacrificial, the clarified butter is offered into the fire by the priest, accompanied by the chanting of mantras. All of it is said, all of this is Brahman. The ladle with which you are making the offering is Brahman, the offering is Brahman, the fire is Brahman, the priest is Brahman. The one who sees Brahman in all activities, in all action, Brahma Karma Samadhi. The one who sees Brahman in all action, which means action is being performed. That one attains to Brahman, who realizes, I am Brahman. See, what a beautiful synthesis of knowledge and action. I pray to Sri Ramakrishna, the Holy Mother, Swami Vivekananda, and this is the month of the worship of the Divine Mother, the Navaratri. So I pray to the Divine Mother Durga to protect all of us at this difficult and troubled time, to bless all of us. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu.